I'm one of those who believe, well, if that hasn't worked for 51 years, let's try something different. And a lot of people say, oh, well, we can't do what other countries do with their farms. We're too hilly. You know, some of our farms are
Plant
too.
hilly crops.
some, some of them are hilly, but we need that kind of joint venture in terms of that mechanization. And I agree with what everybody has said in the past. It should be an estate where people could go and see how things should be done. I agree with BJ in terms of the Center of Excellence. I mean, I love that kind of thought. But I firmly believe we can accelerate our progress with joint ventures in terms of people who can bring in the technology, bring in the mechanization, and we can run the farms as a business. I also believe that the Ministry of Agriculture should be run as a business because mainly what they're doing is business. And instead of a permanent secretary running the show, it should be a business manager that's run the show. And my conclusion is based on the same thing. For 51 years, you've been doing the same thing and you haven't got the result. Isn't it time that you try a different techniques, strategy that works? So I firmly believe that we are not really utilizing our resources as well as we could do. And as Mr. Pierre mentioned, if you see the water in Granba, Granba has an abundance of water and you can divert that water all over the estate. I mean, it's a shame. I know recently I passed there and I've seen them growing sweet potatoes and I'm glad. But the it's the yield per acre we go in.
Are they growing 10 acres? A tree bank.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a nice piece of flat land by the river. That's where they're growing it, and it could be 10 acres there, but we have to look at yield per acre. So, you know, we might be doing like 200 pounds an acre, and the optimum in the world is like 10,000 pounds per acre. So we have to have that level of kind of knowing where we are, where we want to go. And, you know, I don't want to repeat myself, but I really agree, you know, when BJ says about the planning, etc. And it breaks my heart because these are not complex things. And we have people there, but these
Joshua,
simple
when
things.
some people believe when your heart break, you could smoke some weed. When
Yeah.
I watch you two gentlemen face, you don't look as though you know much about weed. However, the government promised to legalize weed. A
Yeah.
bill was introduced in Parliament for so people could discuss the issue. The
Yeah.
government took an action and said they're legalizing weed.
Yeah.
To add to that, the Prime Minister was seen on social media making a movie out of weed.
Okay.
Now the farmers got excited.
Uh-huh.
The farmers got real excited. BG, weed. I think you must be worrying when weed come. You might not get workers to work. You're going to plant weed. Or you perhaps was contemplating planting weed.
Mr. Fear, I'm old enough and I've been around town long enough to know when people are just exaggerating. The people who make those statements aren't thinkers, unfortunately. They are just followers. And sometimes you see a country doing something and you think it's applicable to your country and it isn't at all. It might surprise you that people, farmers in St. Vincent, have a different attitude towards farming than farmers in Grenada. Their work hours, their commitment, all of those. And I'm making that point to say, Mr. Pierre, that given the historical background of marijuana, given where we're coming from, for any individual to jump up and say that we're going to legalize marijuana just like that is an insane person. They're not thinking properly. And I'm saying that you can decriminalize this stuff. And then you can think about legalization later on. Ganja cultivation in Grenada need to be controlled. You want to do ganja, you need to have a license. You need to fence wrong. You need to have cameras. You need to have all the security apparatus that makes you feel safe. The growing of marijuana.
Let's take that
Like-
call, gentlemen.
Wait, hold on.
What you say?
Feel like they hang up.
All right, so BJ gone.
Yeah. Like we was seen in other countries, like the US. What they do, Mr. Pierre, you would have to pay 130,000 US dollars just to process your application form when you're applying to grow marijuana in places like Florida. And your accounts from your business, from your farming activities, has to pass through the federal government. So all your deposit, all your expenditure, everything, the federal government have access to your accounts. So they can see if you're chiseling them, if you're, playing the fool. And they ensure that the tax are collected before you can get any money to dispose of. They take in the portion first. And I'm saying that we only have $2 billion in $3 billion in debt or whatever. We can easily pay out our national debt if we decide to grow marijuana in a controlled way and export it. And I'm not for one who would think that growing ganja for domestic market make any sense. That don't make no sense to me. We should grow marijuana and export it to that should be the principal reason, and export it to the developed countries. They have a good market base for it. They do different things with it, pharmaceutical and whatnot. We can find niche market outside there, not just for mangoes and soursop. We can find for ganja too. But this thing about legalizing ganja and everybody can grow some, this is 1 foot and 1 hand, man. You're going to start chopping up each other and stuff like that. You don't really want to have that level of violence in your country because you're out somewhere. The world go through other different changes and revolutions, You had the Industrial Revolution, you had the Tobacco Revolution, you had the Sugarcane Revolution, you had the Beet Revolution, you have all of those. And if you're having the Ganja Revolution now, even had the Alcohol Revolution not too long ago, just in the 60s and 40s, 1940s, the sheriff used to go up in the hillside in America and shoot some man for making
Weed, moonshine.
moonshine rum, they call it.
Yeah, moonshine. Joshua,
Right.
you ever taste moonshine?
No, not as yet. But I'm interested in the
Which one you interested? Moonshine or weed? What is the position of this weed issue?
the weed issue. I mean, when we first started talking about it, I thought, oh God, I was brought up by my grandmother, and anything like alcohol, weed, and those things, no, I have to stay away from it. But I'm worried about the social consequences in terms of weed, because there is a percentage of the population currently that we'd have an adverse impact on in terms of their use. And there are people who use weed and it has no impact on them. And I think there should have been some greater thought in terms of the social consequences in terms of weed. But the things like the nutraceutical kind of uses and the export, I've read a lot about the various ways that weed can be used. And all kudos to that, and I welcome that. But I'm a little concerned about the social consequences.
Yes, BJ.
Mr. Pierre, just before we
Go ahead.
divert from that talk, the world is of such that if something is in demand, if you're not producing it, you have to prepare to import it, And too much of your money is going outside there to purchase weed. There's a demand for weed in Grenada, and I'm not advocating smoking or the use of marijuana. It probably have good uses and it probably have bad uses, like alcohol and other things. And because the world is in constant movement, development, and change, weed going to be a legal thing in time to come. Just like rum. In the 40s and 50s, the government wanted to make sure that they had to control over that and nobody does that on the outside in an auxiliary way, and they would ensure that it's done under day conditions and ensure that they get a tax and whatnot and whatnot and whatnot. It's the same thing that will happen to weed eventually. It's going to be like nobody bothers with it. Nobody, concentrating on marijuana. The point I'm making is that marijuana need to be seen just as a crop, a valuable crop. And because of the nature of it, we need to control it, because some people consider it as a drug and a harmful substance. And probably it depends on how you use it. It could have, negative effect. The point I'm making is that if there's an external market for it, and the market base is big, and you can earn billions of dollars from it, why not do it and do it in a controlled way so your farmers can be, more or less enrich themselves, your country can do well from it, and you more or less have the thing under control. Is doing the thing and don't have it under control. That is the problem.
And that's where Joshua would like to talk about planning. Joshua?
Yes, Joshua.
No, I think that BJ really hit the nail on the head in terms of what he said. And I don't really have anything to add to that. Like I say, my concern, just like alcohol,
Social implication.
yeah, and the family and the impact, and we have a lot of studies that shows that some people have a predisposition to certain kind of substances, and if it comes in contact, it destabilizes them, and others it does nothing, and quantity and all the rest of it. But I like the economic argument that BJ makes. Mhm.
Yes, and as we go to the
Mr.
economic...
Pierre, before you go on, I just want to reiterate the fact that those things are different effect on different people. Like, for example, if I drink something like SS tonic, I would get drunk. If I would eat black cake, I wouldn't be able to get up from the chair where I'm sitting. If I smell rum, I will just get drunk. I don't have to drink it.
I notice you are avoiding the rum shot.
As I smell it, I drunk. And as it reaches inside my mouth, it goes straight to my head. It doesn't go down in my stomach. The alcohol doesn't have to reach in my stomach for it to get in my bloodstream. As it get in my, as it go inside my mouth, I drunk. I doesn't have to even swallow it.
Well, I think maybe that's why you don't like to sit down on the rum shop
Afraid.
table. The temptation is good. You say that temptation is good. But one of the problems that we have with any crop is the pest management unit. And this is not a joke in the country. That is why they have a pest management unit boot station on the airport to try to prevent things from coming in. We brought in we call it in the sauce up hibiscus many years ago. Millibug. We brought in millibug. And yes, and then we have now this croton scale insect that damaged saucer. It must have been extremely confusing to the farmers that the government had about 10% a unit in pest management unit specifically trying to control the croton scale insect in saucer. And people have to understand, Grenada is the only country in the region that was able to export fresh saucer to the U.S. market. And that was bringing in about 10 million. Now the government came in and closed down the unit. Now you don't know what is going on in the brain of the NDC. They went in and closed down the pest management unit. That must have been extremely confusing. They re-established the unit, but now they have about 3 or 4 people. They had about 10 or 12 before. We have a caller on the line, and after that, BJ will respond. Yes, caller, welcome. Yes, caller, welcome. You hear any caller?
No, they hang up.
All right, BJ.
Mr. Pierre, like I was saying initially, some of the things that you see happening, you want to know if we're not thinking properly. For example, soursop is too important a crop for you to be closing down the pest management unit that is dealing with entomology in that department. They had a nice little team going wrong, and I got services from them in the past. They came in on our farm and spray a few times, and this did help. And I have seen them spraying other farmers' fields. And not that the farmers sometimes cannot spray their own field, but it's a good initiative to see the government stepping in and saying, you know something, that area, that sector is too important for us to leave it unchecked. Plus, because
Let's
we
take
do...
that caller. Yes, caller, welcome.
Hey, Mr. P, how you doing?
Yes, go right ahead, caller.
Mr. P, every time I call, I'm always talking about the Prime Minister and his lavish lifestyle. If you really check out how the Prime Minister operates, he said the Tillman and them had poor and they didn't know how to use it. And what a scene for me. It's just a lavish lifestyle. The money the Prime Minister spending to go abroad, you could imagine that money would have been spent in that community. It would change so many citizens' lives. And it would have been better for the Prime Minister too. Because that would have been good. You have to pay taxes going back in the economy. The Prime Minister have nothing about the leadership in him. He knows nothing about that. They say he's intelligent, but that don't make you a leader. That don't make you a leader. What is man doing? We have to wake up our eyes and see what he's doing, and he will do anything to protect that. What they're trying to do is they want a one-party state. That is what they want to murder people. So we're going to have open again. We're going to have political prisoners.
Well, that's not
and that's what
possible.
I'm scared of.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I don't care who in there.
Yeah.
If I see anything, what I support you or not, I'm going to run my mouth.
Yes, yes,
I
caller.
don't want that to be taken away, man.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
anyway, down, man.
Thank you, caller. Well, obviously, some of this money could have diverted to prevent closing down the pest management unit, BG.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Pierre, this soursop industry is a multi-million-dollar industry. This soursop industry, we are not giving it its due service at a policy level and at a government level. If we are the only country that can send fresh soursop in the US and the market is more or less limitless to a certain extent, I don't think we might even be able to produce the quantity of soursop that is needed and continue to be needed on the US market. It simply means that we're not capitalizing on what we ought to be doing. If we want our farmers to make money, we have to understand that the crop husbandry of soursop, we get it to a T. We have to ensure that the fields are sprayed, the fields are kept, under good condition, the fruits that we are getting are healthy fruits. We have to ensure that we get top dollar for it also. And I'm afraid that one of these good days, we wouldn't be able to produce the thing that is needed outside there on the external market. And somebody else may get the opportunity to do it. You see how we're behaving, or they are behaving trade-wise. China and the US and Mexico and the US and Canada and the US and whatnot.